Well, hello and welcome everybody to the class MECO6909 Crisis Communication. I believe you're here because you do have an interest in the topic, or you do at least have a question about the topic. What is crisis communication? You might wonder what this class is about, how it is structured, how you can enroll in it if you are a student at the university, and how is it related to the particular programs for which it is part of. So let me start with that last one first. Crisis communication is a 6 credit point unit of study, postgraduate level, that is offered as a core unit in the Master of Health Communication. It's a core unit in the Master of Strategic Public Relations, also in the same department of Media and Communication, and it is one of the units that you take in the Master of Health Securities, which is offered through the School of Political and Social Sciences at the University of Sydney. This is, to date, still a face-to-face class, so you would have to be present in the 2 hours of meeting throughout the semester, which is a 13-week program. We are working on an online version, but to date this is not ready yet, so you would have to actually be physically in the area. And of course, this is not a Coursera-type course either. So it's not a massive online course, so you can't just enroll in it without being enrolled in one of the programs I've listed or related programs in health sciences or social sciences. And then it becomes a free elective for you, of course, but you would need to be part of the university program. Crisis communication, it's an interesting word, and it touches upon all these different programs I mentioned simply because it both touches on health. Mostly when we talk about health, there's some form of a crisis that needs to be managed or addressed. Of course, that also belongs to the idea of biosecurity and health security issues that are particularly relevant for this particular topic. And lastly, most of the activities in crisis management are persuasion or public relations activities. And so, of course, if you are a public relations expert, to deal with crises, one of your jobs, or could be one of your jobs. The class itself sort of follows a natural pattern. It doesn't use a particular book. It uses reading packs that are available once you're enrolled throughout the online connection bits. But it follows an arc where we start with the idea of how is public relation management done, what is it, and what are the theories behind it, to give us a sort of like a foundation for the rest. We'll then actually look at the discipline of conflict resolution management and crisis management, which are subdisciplines of public relations, of course, as I mentioned. And so we'll discuss those in more detail. And we'll end that on the idea of how can we research this? How do we research cases in crisis communication? So we'll look at methodologies and approaches to it, because this is actually also one of the assessments. I will talk about those in a minute. We then look at particular elements of crisis communication that are daily occurrences in this industry or discipline, such as dealing with particular crises through various stakeholder strategies. So, for instance, how do I actually develop a crisis communication plan? What goes in it? What kind of audiences do I need to know about? Because there's different kinds. For instance, if you're not affected by a crisis, it just exists, you're a very different audience than if you are the direct target of a problem. For instance, you bought frozen berries and you have them stocked in your fridge, and then somebody tells you they're poisoned. So that's a pretty different issue. And if you are the PR agency of the frozen berry company, you will, of course, need to deal with that adequately. So that then leads me to another point. We need to look particularly at stakeholders and the different elements there, and when and how to address them. We look at boycotts, and we look at recalls as a particular element, and we look at stakeholder action. So these are oppositional groups that could stage anything from a protest to a online anti-campaign against our employer or company for which we are working. We need to look at evaluating this. How do we do that well? We then put this all together in the very end in how is the day-to-day operation looking? So how do we actually interface with the media? What do we do in press conferences if we are in a crisis, and what should we not do? That is right about the way how the class sort of rolls out. How do you deal with that? Meaning, how do you get assessed? Now, there are sort of short answer essay type assessments where you need to address a particular case study that comes your way and need to demonstrate your skill set that you have acquired up to this point. So, have you learned the topic? You will also need to um, uh, put a question or comment on the parallel class blog. So we have a parallel discussion online which interfaces with the class discussion because I grab as an instructor from the blog some parts of the discussion and put it into the classroom, which, as I had mentioned already, is also more or less a discussion among everybody in the class. There is a group project at the very end, which of course takes you a few weeks to sort of develop and write out, which is actually a research project. So you don't need to approach anyone. You pick a particular crisis case that you found interesting as a group from the world of media, and analyze the current state of how they managed the crisis, how they communicated the response, and how you assess that basically. And you can suggest, of course, a different course of action at the end. But primarily, I'm very interested in whether you understand how a crisis was dealt with, because clearly you cannot develop anything on your own unless you understand what goes into it. And that means you have to actually be a good evaluator or critic of crisis communication before you can develop your own crisis communication. So these are around about the assessments, the assessment structure, and I think I'll leave it there. If you're interested in learning more about it, there is, where is it? Oh, I got it here. So at the bottom here, sorry, I'm looking everywhere, there should be a little line that tells you how to learn more about this topic. Then there would be also, you can browse the website where that you are now on to see how you find me and how you can contact me. So I'll leave it there, and I'll say goodbye and hope to hear from you soon.